necesidad creciente no nos siga aniquilando. Compañero, compañero, escuche mis sentimientos y que viaje con el viento. Entre anhelo guerrillero. Sé que pienso porque existo, sé que existo con un sueño que es mi sueño, un mismo empeño y desempeño, no desisto. Compañero, compañero, escuche mis sentimientos y que viaje con el
Yo, I come from me in the stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want. And you don't even do what you can, you do what you told. I got no love for my foes. They can mimic my delivery and copy my prose. But what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth. Can't come from the same loom. Fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children. You can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Welcome back to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win. Geechee Ya. And who are you?
I'm the cutest cultural worker. Freezing up
know.
a little bit, but the cutest cultural worker is back, y'all.
Oh, you freezing up?
I think you freezing up, but
Oh, maybe I'm freezing. So I'm delayed.
yeah, you got some pauses, but maybe that's on my end. I don't know.
Oh, well, I don't see it on my end. But anyway, sorry. I think Yusuf is not coming. I'm not sure. He might be in or a little late. But I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat. How y'all doing? I don't know if it's freezing. I don't know why it's freezing, but you can tell me. But yeah, welcome to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, which is a CMB, Community Movement Builders podcast that gives you Black radical politics according to our perspectives and vantage points here on Black Liberation Media with the gang of other shows every day of the week. I think every day of the week. Y'all already know. So what we want you to do is not only take all this stuff to yourself, but copy and paste that link to somebody who you want to engage in more radical conversations with, especially as it relates to misogynoir, feminism, and other patriarchal conversations. So looking forward to bringing on our brother Lord later on. But till then, yeah, what's up? How was this weekend, and what's your reflections?
I'm well, just I feel like today is finally hitting me because it was like show, and then we had to take care of some internal stuff with the org and conversations and whatnot, and then I've gotten a spark of inspiration and talk about this gender stuff. So I've been kind of like me, I don't know if it's my neurodivergentness, but when I really like want to talk or think about something, I like just go in and I'm not thinking about rest or eating or anything. And so but I'm feeling good. Last week was great. From the Brian Kwoba book event that Geechee and Sister Dartricia hosted. That was great. I finally got the book. I'm excited to get deep into it. And then this weekend, my solo show, which was a part of the Culture Workers Got Something to Say, that was pretty amazing too. I wasn't expecting us to, kind of sell it that much. Pretty much every show, we had a good turnout. I think people received the show well. I think it planted a good amount of seeds. I think the talkbacks that we did after the shows, that they definitely we were able to kind of see more of like where different people are at, and then also like, I feel like even that was an experience for me to just kind of see different things that people in the audience were saying and reflections of their politics, and how my show affected them and whatnot, and how Jihad's show affected people as well. It was great to collaborate with him and the other brother Saddam. It was dope. So yeah, I feel really good. I feel like Sorry, you froze. I thought were you trying to say something? Oh,
No,
okay.
I was saying Salam.
It's Saddam. I'm telling you, I got his number, and it's
Oh,
Saddam, and I text him his thing. It's Saddam, and it's on the playbill too. I'm like, it's Saddam. I promise you, because I was calling him Salam at first, and then Jihad was. Well, maybe that's what he was slipping up on. But if you even look in the playbill, it says Saddam because I was sent his bio. But yeah, so it was good to connect and do the talk back and yeah, and just overall just doing the show, it felt really good. It's emotional. But I felt good. I'm happy, you know, this took a while, you know, as far as planning wise. So I guess it really showed, you know, obviously I know it's still theater, but it showed like, I guess, my capabilities, even as an organizer and other things we can organize as a committee, and look forward to other people's ideas and how we can put things together and work together. I think this was able to really be a success because we were very particular about the roles, and AG, our brother in our org, was very clear as stage manager about everybody's role. And so it's just always cool when everything comes together.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have anything else other than, yeah, I thought that was a nice long week. A lot of interesting things that was going on. Yeah, any other, I guess, reflections and stuff?
I want to hear more of your reflections. I know you share some stuff, but I want you to share with the people how you feel about the shows and just your experience being a part of it, and yeah, and even some of the book talk too.
Yeah, no, I think it was really good to be in conversation with Brian. We pretty much was hanging out most of the week, and then we had another conversation on Saturdays with Renee, and I think that conversation led into more of inter-org conflict and resolution, as you know, Hubert Harrison's chapter on UNIA was I think pretty significant. So I think just being in conversation, seeing Mama Pat there was pretty dope. Patricia Rodney, and building with her, and then the play, I think is the same thing. Like I was more so watching the crowd's interaction, so I could like formulate some questions, but I think all of them kind of like connected to each other. Like I said that time when both of y'all kind of referenced Harlem at 2 different points, and yeah, so I thought that was pretty good. And then all of the conversations were spot on. The last night was interesting, and I'm like always thinking like yeah, like bringing people into conversation whenever they have ideas that we disagree with, and then how to do that. I feel like that's a science that we haven't all seemed to master, whether it be online or in space or at events. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of conversations spin from that. In fact, on the way to the studio, one of the brothers who came to the book talk was like, man, I've never been into anything like that before. I'm still riding on the high. And he was like, I've never even actually, that libations thing, I never really experienced that. Like that was dope, man. I want to do more, and I want to come to the next event. So so I thought that was pretty dope. So yeah, I think that was my reflections or thoughts.
That was dope. That libations, I forgot to cut that. That was cool. Like I said, it brought me back to when I was in Brooklyn, and I just feel like, you know, in politics, we may have been struggle, but I just think that there was this beautiful openness to, like, you know, just African customs and respect for the ancestors. And I think that there's a way we can still, you know, incorporate these things even in political study and struggling as an organization. And yeah, I thought that was cool too.
Yeah. So Josh will be joining us. I'm sorry, Lorick or Josh. I'm sorry, Lorick will be joining us very soon. He'll be coming up, and we'll be discussing an article, but also some other things. But yeah, I'm curious. You know, when you think about this culture worker concept, what do you like? You know, I know you talked about like your growth, but what do you see as a common theme, and then like what type of things do it make you want to do going forward? I guess as an organizer too. So what has that show and the post show activated in you in terms of how you want to show up going forward, if anything?
As far as what I want to do going forward, the show, how it impacted me, I guess to not count things out, like, you know, as far as whether it be people, opportunities, the impact. I think as a culture worker, I always struggle, you know, with, you know, knowing that I love art and it's an important and special thing to me. Like, does it really have the power to do the thing that I think it can do and affect people and get people thinking about stuff? Or is that just something that I like to believe because it's what I, you know, enjoy doing? You know, so I think this weekend I was able to see like, oh, wow, that this really does lead to things. And it may not, like I said, directly lead to automatic organizing, but I can see the seeds being planted. I can see even my dad came every show. He came all 3 shows. And me and him always arguing about political stuff. And, you know, he's always, you know, saying something I may disagree with when it comes to his projections of what I am as an organizer, as a radical, whatever you want to call me. And I think it was cool to hear him and speak with him afterwards. And him not only, you know, obviously he's going to talk about the show and how impressed and my acting and all but for him to be like, oh yeah, you making me rethink some things, you know, too, you know? And so I think, and he's 74 years old. So I think, you know, stuff like that is powerful. You know, it's just like, oh, wow. And I always call him the most stubborn person. So it's just like, that was a lot to kind of hear like, oh, you got me thinking about some things. So I think, it, I guess, proves to me once again that art is valid. You know, yes, I'm very clear on no, it can't only be art. It has to be action too. But like I said, it also makes me feel confident. I think being in a movement space and doing the thing that I'm most confident and knowledgeable in makes me see even more possibilities of my capabilities of things that I'm not as knowledgeable in, or things that I may be more insecure in, like, you know, leading PEs or leading, or, you know, pushing for a mutual aid program, or pushing or working with the neighborhood to create community control, and all of those things, you know, sound very scary for me sometimes. But I think, you know, being able to be in this space and do something that I'm used to, putting up a show and, you know, still going, having it to be planned out and do the work and whatnot, I think it shows me that, like, okay, if you can do this, you know, that even though you love it and whatnot, like, you're very much capable of being able to, you know, do the work, to do other things within the community, within your organization, within leadership. Like, you're very much capable of doing those things, you know? So, and just pushing through, because I think, yeah, I mean, obviously my show is about, you know, struggle. There's a struggle between the sisters, and, you know, there's, you know, an outcome that is reached. But I think too, sometimes I don't realize, you know, how much everything is a struggle. We have to struggle with these conversations, and struggle with how we, you know, just struggle as an org, but just realizing that it's a process, and that it's not always going to feel good. Like, doing this show obviously didn't always feel good. There's times I was nervous, scared, whatnot, but, you know, it still pushed through to get, and that's fighting for revolution, is accepting that it's going to be times where it's not easy or looks scary, but you have to push through. So, you know, I'm excited for more that can be done with that specific show. I'm excited for the new things I can create. And I'm just excited about organizing and collaboration with Baba Jihad and stuff, and all of that for the future.
Yeah. So Stephen, yeah, that was Cherie talking about the show and reflections and moving forward. I think I did see you. We didn't get the chance to connect, but yeah, thanks for coming through. And yeah, we enjoyed your presence, and as things go on, we should connect more. So
you came to the best one. You came to Saturday one. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. One might say you need to dare to struggle. Yeah. No, that Yeah, Saturday. I can't remember which one was the like each of them had each night had their own like thing that was interesting or like I appreciated about it. So it was like because that as you even talked about, like the first show was like super packed. It was like, oh my gosh, that's probably gonna be the packest night. But then every night was generally packed. And yeah, so I think just and then the build, even after the discussion, like the build, people wanted to kind of connect and talk about these different things, and that's normally what it is, right? Even if you're doing just lectures or conversations, like normally people want to come. Now the follow up, is probably up to us as organizers, but
yeah,
at least people are beginning to show interest that we could build on later. So yeah.
Yeah. What was your favorite night? Or what was I know you can't remember each night, but like what is your favorite thing that stood out to you?
Yeah, I don't know if I had a favorite night, but probably was just the connection that everybody was making between the two performances, and they were able to like the fact that y'all never planned, like you wrote yours before he wrote his way a long time ago, and y'all didn't plan particularly like for it to kind of be the same. I don't know if he was like, well, knowing your show and then I'm gonna do this show because it's similar, but I think the synergy between the two shows was good. So I don't know if it was last night, but I know we got our brother in the back. So before we get to our brother, we'll take this quick break and then bring Brother Lord up and get into this conversation. Y'all ready?
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
You muted.
I hit the thing and it's still, but hey, what's up, Lyric? We got we got Lyric on here because specifically when I was thinking about this topic, I remembered the last time we talked a little bit about feminism when Sister Khadijah came on, and we talked about kind of like neoliberal feminism and the origins of white feminism. Like you had some more things that I feel like were valid to add into the discussion, and me and Geechee have been kind of having a bit of a discussion about some gender stuff and its place in organizing and how it all connects. So yeah, I guess I just there was an article about Massage Noir that I shared, but then I've also been studying off of recommendation from Geechee. I'm probably gonna say the name wrong. The
Combahee River Collective.
Combahee River Collective. Okay, I didn't want to say it wrong, but I've also been looking into them, which I was a little familiar with that because they're connected to this other page that I follow, or a group of women I follow called the Radical Women on Instagram.
Black Women Radicals.
Black Women Radicals. Yeah. So yeah, I was a little familiar with them. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to come on here and talk about this because I know, you're in Black Men Build and there's women in there as well. And I think that this gender thing is really important, and we have to find a way to, be able to collectively struggle around this and that, and also build a foundation on like definitions and words and the importance of language and things like that, which I've seen from other things I've watched. You're really good at laying the foundation for. I watch on Remix and how you guys talked about stuff with socialism and all of that. So I don't know. I just was like, I think he'd be good to have on. So yeah, that's my intro.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should start it with a specific question. I don't know if we should ground it. I have something, that I guess from me and Geechee's discussion with some definitions of terms. I don't know if we should start with that or if I should open with the question. Sorry, I kind of just got this. I came up with the suggestion for this topic last minute. So sorry.
You're fine. I actually have an idea based off of that though.
Oh, okay. Great.
Because you laid out a lot of great context. So a lot of times with the definitions, I'm just looking for the origin, right? Like where did these words come from? or origins, because a lot of times different ideas, even under different labels, exist in different places, right? In response to conditions. So really, I like to ask this question, like, where did you run into this term? Because what's always interesting to me about these conversations is I'm always like, I don't know, that wasn't my experience. So I'm always curious because we seem to have different experiences running into different figures who represent these ideologies. So same way someone might run into a socialist and see them being very dogmatic and unable to communicate and having certain odd takes, right? That isn't a representation of socialism. I have that kind of critique of people who talk about feminism based on who they interacted with without looking at its origins. So I was curious, when was the first time y'all heard the term feminism in your life? And then we can maybe get into some roots of the word.
Gotcha. Did you want to go first, Kichi? Or?
Yeah, for me, I probably cannot remember the first time I heard about feminism. I think, I think, learning from learning about and reading a little bit of Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and even Asada, is probably the first time but I just don't remember exactly when, but those were like my introduction to hearing about it. Intentionally, I probably heard the word and then even with African womanism, I there's a lot of times I've been in trying to figure out the distinction between the two. So I've been doing that a lot, but I can't really remember the time of the first. Yeah.
What about you, Sheree?
I think it might have been a little before the whole Bill Cosby scandal came up, and I can't remember my exact age. I know I was in my 20s. I'm assuming mid 20s, and I think I was just really trying to find myself. And I remember a little bit before that, I started to I kind of immediately saw the conflict, I think, even as a Black woman with feminism, because I think I had started to be like, yeah, I'm a feminist, I think because I started to be like, okay, yeah, that means you're for women's equality, whatever. I'm just looking at that surface level. And then this whole Cosby thing came up. And I just remember that's when I first started to kind of hear more about the focus of a specific thing or struggle that Black women have, because I know that was a hard time for a lot of Black women. A lot of Black women felt very conflicted with, a lot of people somewhat jumping to Cosby's defense and, and a lot of Black women being shunned if they're not necessarily pro Bill Cosby or pro he didn't do that or pro, he was trying to buy NBC or whatever. So that's when I think I first started to think about what does feminism mean and what does feminism mean for Black women? And I think also around that time, I was kind of in a specific kind of group or environment in New York where I guess people would qualify us or classify us as hoteps or whatever. We were all, on our Afrocentric tip or whatever. And I remember that's when I started to see even a divide in that space where there was this just, feminism destroyed the Black community. And that was at the same time as the Hidden Colors documentaries coming out. So there was this big, feminism destroyed the Black community. And I just remember feeling very conflicted of okay, but then so are we just supposed to praise Bill Cosby, who did all these things that weren't even necessarily positive for Black people, outside of maybe his show, which even that can be questioned, But yeah, so I think that's when I really started to formulate some contradictions and, confusion in the space when it came to feminism and being a Black woman.
All right. So the way I hear from both of y'all is similar to me. So there are ideas, there are issues that we're observing in the real world, and then there are struggles unfolding to address those issues. And then over time, people kind of identify these things under an umbrella. So this is how I come to understand feminism. So what you're describing, I would say two immediate issues, rape culture, just from a young child, that idea that girls are fast, victim blaming, that kind of thing. Now, of course, this becomes the argument, well, it affects Black boys too. Yeah, obviously, right? That's the thing. But the logic used was almost always, subordinating womanhood, feminine qualities, girls, that kind of thing. So one was rape culture. The other would be just work conditions, the division of labor. So Women are expected to do all sorts of things as a part of their social being. When I ask why, it's just cuz, right? So when I see those things, those are the issues. And so when you start arguing back against those things, like a lot of us do, usually after a while, people can see parallels in your argument with certain ideologies. So if you keep talking about, man, I'm getting ripped off at work, man, my boss don't do nothing, man, my manager sucks, all these things, eventually someone's going to say, hey, you heard of this Marx guy? You heard of this socialism thing, right? So that's how I was exposed to feminism the same way. I kept making these arguments, and then people are like, oh, that's feminist shit. So I'm like, okay, well, what is feminist shit? And so I go look it up, and that's how I get into it. It's funny you mentioned the Combahee. Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor has a book about the members, because again, they were a collective. So a lot of people don't study the members. These members have different political outlooks, class interests, and things, just like we have to study Marxism, Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism as an umbrella. Same with feminism. So one of the women in Combahee talks about how she didn't know what a feminist was. She just was dealing with all this sexist bullshit in her life, went to college, saw a pamphlet, some basic PE about feminism, and was like, oh, that's me, right? So that is how I come to kind of understand feminism. And then from there, I think it's good to go look at the scholarship, but particularly to look at movement. Because again, when I hear feminism discussed, I rarely hear it discussed seriously as a movement. Like, what are its demands? What are some of the campaigns it's launched? What are its aims and objectives? Like that kind of thing, right? So in that case, the Bill Cosby thing, like, let's look at that, right? Was it a movement? Yeah, it did have a lot of different elements. Not as many revolutionary elements as I'd like, obviously, but like, it's a problem. So I'm seeing that. So what was that campaign? It was a campaign to prosecute a rapist. So as you said, Cherie, like, is that something we disagree with? Right? We may have a different approach. Like, abolitionists might want, a different form of justice, and we can debate that. But like, if the campaign here is like punishing predators, and that is what y'all are calling feminism, well, then now I'm like, all right, so feminism is an ideology that's meant to address like what we do with rapists. That's kind of important. Same thing about housework. So when I go look at early feminist campaigns, I'm seeing people asking for equal wages, empowerment in the workplace, all of these things. And this happens obviously from white women, primarily being the first ones to articulate it. But where I'm going to ask us to go is to take it to the text. When we see Black feminist theory, like, what is the first thing they talk about? So I have a Decolonial Feminism right here in front of me by Francois Vergès. My pronunciation might be wrong. But the first thing it talks about is who cleans the world. And it's talking about a strike of Black and brown women in Paris and tying it to all of these other global movements of workers, particularly workers in sectors of the economy that women were relegated to. So I see, the first thing I hear about feminism, decolonial feminism, is a class struggle, right? I go to Bell Hooks' work. She's talking about race, gender, class, growing up in a marginalized, segregated town, being forced to cross railroad tracks, being forced to see the world as a colonized individual from the outside in, and having so these are the first 2 points I ever see about feminism when I look at Black feminist scholarship. Now, everyone's point of entry is different, is my thing, but that's usually where I would like to start. So that was mostly my critique. Demetra Frazier, undefeated chat, thank you. That was the Combahee River Collective person I was talking about. But my first point of critique when I see people talk about feminists is, where is your relationship to the text? Like, what are you actually reading here that you disagree with? And in a lot of discussions I've seen so far, that's been a little lacking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because I think the way you lay it out, I think, that's the way I've always seen, is like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I definitely have always been open to how, like, any structure or ideology can be manipulated or weaponized in a sense to do something opposite of what it might have, originally intended to, especially when I say originally as far as Black feminism, because I know there's contradictions of what was the original intent of, I guess, a white feminist movement. But I feel like, it can always be used, manipulated, purposely kind of used to do something that isn't really what it's supposed to do. But I think at its surface, there's always been like especially when it comes to like a more radical view of Black feminism that, is considering class as well, along with gender. I think, that's why, even with the conversation with Khadijah, I know she was saying that, overall it cannot be a liberatory framework, where I kind of disagree with that, where I think it still can be a liberatory framework. We can critique, feminist scholars and some of their limitations, or even feminist movements, the same way we critique other movements and their limitations, whether it be socialist movements that, didn't center Black people, or whether it be, Black movements that, struggle with gender, or struggle with sexuality principles. So I think it can be a similar thing when it comes to feminism. That's just kind of where I'm landing. I don't know if I have like a question or anything.
So I know you said that before. So when Khadijah was saying that, is that like in her what she wrote, or is it something she said on the show? And then I'm like, I want to know what was she saying? Like what cannot be a liberatory framework? Feminism as it stands, feminism, like what exactly?
She was saying on my show, and also when she was on Dr. CBS's show, she also mentioned how she does not see it as a liberatory framework, and that you can work on gender issues and work around class and race and not identify themselves and not identify yourself as a feminist, and that it's not necessary to identify yourself as a feminist to do gender work. And I guess for me, I don't, like I said, I guess, maybe, you don't have, you can, I guess work against capitalism and not call yourself a socialism, not call yourself a socialist, but, I don't know. So, I mean, I think that's not for me to put, I guess on her. I'm just saying for me, I just think it helps to put an actual name on something, because I think when you don't have a name on something, it just can leave, I guess, the situation more vulnerable. The same way somebody that will say I can work against capitalism without identifying myself as a socialism, it can just leave them open to certain things that aren't necessarily anti-capitalist. I think the same thing can happen when you're saying I can work for the benefit of women and gender and race, social issues or a revolution, but without calling myself a feminist. I think the dangers are you can leave yourself open to things that are counter the very politics that work towards collective liberation when it comes to gender. But I think, and that's another thing when it comes to womanists, and I think womanists, I will say is a type of feminism or something, if we're going to, and I know people can push back against that, but I consider it a type of feminism. So I still wouldn't necessarily get mad if somebody was like, oh, I'd rather say womanist, because the way I was brought up was thinking that womanist was just Black feminism. But I know that there is Africana womanism, which from what my reading, of some stuff on Hood Communist is a little different than what I've known womanist to be. So that, that is when it can get a little mixy. But but yeah, I do think that womanism is a form of feminism. For the most part, that's what, it's seen as. So yeah.
I agree. And this is just a debate that people are going to have over semantics. So if you want to get to unity, I think you should have clear definitions and understandings and things. So if I think feminism is an umbrella term and womanism falls under that, cool. Some people would say that womanism is its own thing and that feminism is cool. If we agree on how we're defining that, that's fine. To your point, though, I'm just like, at the end of the day, right? Dr. King wasn't a communist. That's important to know in terms of his ideology, but the feds had him marked as a communist. So a lot of times, right, even if you're not a feminist, depending on your work, if you're serious enough, it still might be labeled under the feminist umbrella. But my biggest thing is also, how does this work look in the field? Because there are still going to be feminist organizations that you run into, right? So are you willing to work with them? Does the organization that you work with have objectives that align with those? Then cool, right? Malcolm didn't openly identify as a socialist in the way that a lot of us would have liked, but he was speaking in socialist forms. Right. So what was his aims and objectives? What was his analysis? Are they aligned? cool. But I hear you, and that's how I tend to approach things, mostly because of what I said. The enemy's probably going to label you under that umbrella, and though you don't have to define by what the enemy does, there's a like dialectic here at play when we're all approaching these same issues, right, from different positions, and the enemy is noticing, oh, we can maybe put this under an umbrella. In Florida, when they put the Stop Woke Act to ban the books in the schools and all those things, they called it gender ideology, for example. Marxism, gender ideology, critical race theory. I think those are the umbrella terms. So I'm just very interested when people start movements based on these issues and ideas, how does the enemy then label them? And then, of course, try to destroy them. So that's my approach.
Yeah, I don't know if Geechee had something to add. Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, I was just thinking, like I said, back on that episode, and I just remember you in the comments kind of say some things like, I guess you were, because she was, I guess, more so talking about the roots of feminism and how that right. And how, like, you know, I guess a lot of very liberal types of which we always discuss in Black feminism anyway, is the liberal approach to feminism, and the very white liberal approach that, you know, how she used the example of like weaponizing being anti-Palestinian because you're talking about, these Palestinian men are raping people, and kind of just using that as a thing to like justify obviously the genocide or something, and how that is extremely problematic. You know, but yeah, so that was like one example that I think, like I said, that's a valid critique. But I think what I struggle with and what I see happens much too often is because on you know, I guess maybe on the revolutionary side, because liberal feminism and things like that are critiqued, and you have somebody like maybe her, even somebody that I haven't necessarily read a lot of work, but just heard kind of, you know, the basis of their stances, like a Tommy Curry. What I kind of personally fear sometimes as a Black feminist myself is that people that you know, like, it's one thing, like I said, if you've already studied feminism on your own or worked in some sort of feminist organization, or, you know, you're able to really have some sort of foundational understanding of it to be like, okay, we can move beyond that and all this other thing. But I think it's another thing, I think, coming from, like I said, when I first brought up the whole Bill Cosby situation and Hidden Colors era, where it's just like, oh, feminism destroyed the Black community. I think to come out of that kind of mindset, and, you know, a lot of those things are still out there online, and it's trickled into a whole culture, you know, around us. And I think, you know, I'm always considering the culture, whether it be media or the mainstream. I think living in a culture where that is such a prominent thing, to jump from there to like trying to actually understand what an analysis of what Khadijah may be saying, or Tommy Curry, I think, and a lot of women's or maybe feminist concerns with that work is that, you know, the red pill people will see that and immediately, you know, jump to there before even understanding what feminism is, you know, I mean, I know I'm being a bit dramatic, but I hope I
don't think you are. I think you're being accurate. And I also would say that method, again, of looking at feminism is just not my own, and it's not one I find conducive, because whenever that stream of analysis talks about feminism, it's very rarely rooted in the movements. What were they trying to do? What were they, the conferences look like? The Combahee River Collective talks about coming out of two conferences. Talking about coming out of the white socialist movement and talking about coming out of a mainstream Black feminist movement. Senator Hubert Harrison, who you've been discussing with Koba, trying to deal with the white socialist movement and also the Black nationalist movement, right? And navigating those two. So that's why I have issues with those things. Let's say we're an organization, or you're trying to be conscious, or you're coming in a movement, and you go to some space and they talk about Black feminism. What we've all been organizers, what are the resources? What are the first things people usually tell you to go read? Now, sometimes it's liberal nonsense, but most of us, it's like bell hooks, feminism from margin to center. That's what I've been told. Now, sometimes it's all about love and all of those things, but bell hooks is the one I hear most commonly critiqued as well. And to your point about the red pill, like, if you don't read this stuff, you would come out thinking bell hooks was CIA based on her analysis. I want to talk about analysis, not associations, not all those things. So when you read the books, I struggle, right, to see how people are coming away with what they believe about feminism based on what's in the text. which when the text begins by critiquing what you say, like an adjective. So if you want to call it imperial feminism, that's cool. Bell Hooks calls it bourgeois feminism or mainstream feminism. So you're just calling it a different thing, but it's all under the same loop. And how does she, if you read the text, how does Bell Hooks critique bourgeois feminism? She cites this guy, what's his name? Karl Marx. That's who she cites in the feminist text to critique bourgeois feminism. And then she starts by talking about how it's automatically Black feminism comes as a critique to bourgeois white mainstream feminism. So when I'm looking at my root, where my tradition comes from as a Black revolutionary, right? That's where I see it. So that's where we enter the discourse, the movement, all of those things. So I'm just a little confused usually when I hear this critique, because it almost always sounds like it's tied to academic feminism, a sort of feminism that only lives in, the classroom, particularly not even the classroom, more like the university, and all the struggles that these academics have within the university, which cool, great. But I'm trying to see how this stuff lives in, our communities, not that those are separate.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with that. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, Nkechi, or question. Okay.
I'm waiting. So are we getting to that article or?
I was gonna. Yeah, that's what I was about to. I just didn't know if there was any about just overall definitions or feminine that you had to add to. But I was about to kind of go more into the article. So I found this article because me and Geechee were kind of having some dialogue about, to me, I guess, and the reason I guess what started this dialogue was pointing out things that I think people who aren't, existing in this world in the body of a Black woman can sometimes be unaware of when it comes to how we approach discussions about gender and misogyny. So we started talking about like certain things like, I guess of how a person, or I think to me, if we're trying to all get to collective liberation, like I'm very much understanding that we have to struggle and talk about things. But I guess I'm looking at like just certain basic, minor things that I think people that, like I said, aren't in bodies of Black women or whatever can be a little bit, can have some blind spots with or whatever, whether it be like, that aren't, they may not personally be like a misogynist or something, but like, just certain frameworks that I think can trigger a Black woman or whatnot when trying to talk about gender stuff or trying to speak up on their personal experience, and just certain like actions that I think could be like appropriate in order for these discussions to actually deal with to actually be able to focus on the issue at hand. So some of my critiques, which I think, can connect to like many people, but like certain things like, I feel like in movement spaces, we can be more aware of like how we describe Black women. Like, even if we're getting in like an argument or having a disagreement with someone, we can be aware of like, if we're using words like aggressive, like how that is triggering because of a particular history with Black women and with misogynoir specifically. Not to say that you can't get up, be upset or have a disagreement with the Black woman, or it has to be some liberal thing as like, oh, Black women can do no wrong or whatever. But just being aware of like words that we use, whether it's, if we're referring to a Black woman as aggressive, or another specific thing talking about when we're reenacting Black women, especially we're talking about like something a Black woman said, what are the mannerisms we use when we're like talking about that Black woman, like being aware of like if we're rolling our head or snapping our neck or whatever, how those things can be seen as, as not that person is a misogynist, but how that can be tied to the way misogynoir affects particularly Black women. And so I guess I've been trying to do my best to like word out and connect that to like a feminist struggle. Even when it comes to this, kind of my last example, but also the way we center ourselves in conversations when we know we are a person of privilege. Like me as a lighter skinned woman, I know if darker sisters are talking about their experience with colorism, even if I might have gone through this, that, and the third as a child or called white or whatever, I'm not going to jump in the conversation and be like, oh, well, me as a light skinned woman, this happened to me and it, and it really sucked or whatever. I'm going to make sure I hold that space for them talking about their particular situation first. If it naturally occurs or gets to the point where it's like, you know, oh, well, what do you experience? So then, you know, I'll speak my truth, but I'm just always hyper aware of like when or always trying to give a particular sensitivity to talking about my experience or my point of view, even knowing how I show up in this world. And so I guess sometimes me being new to the movement space, I guess I know a lot of, and having been somewhat of a feminist before coming into movement space, I know that these are things that make women hesitant of organizing, of movement, because they feel like they still are going to possibly get hit with those same things of like, am I aggressive? Or, you know, if I speak up on something I'm experienced as a woman, is like, well, what about this that I do as a man, or that I'm, so I don't know. I guess for me, that's why I thought it was important to kind of understand misogynoir, and I'm still trying to find a way to frame it into a politic and not necessarily like just feelings or like a neoliberal thing. And I think I struggle with that. So I don't know. I just wanted to engage in some dialogue around that, because I think there's a similar thing now, you know, where it's like, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going on, but there's a similar thing where, you know, you may have white leftists that, you know, understand or feel like they have analysis of identity reductionism, you know, and they'll be able to cast things as, oh, you're being identity reductionist, when it's like, I'm really talking about principal identity politics. And this is actually racism that I'm referring to, but because you feel like you have this very, you know, far left analysis on identity reductionism, now it's hard for me to even be in a space where I can address racism and actual identity politics. And so I think women I'm struggling. I don't want to speak for all women, but I struggle, and I can assume other Black women struggle with, how do I discuss these things from a principled political stance?
I agree. And that's why I'm saying we need to be materialists and actually read the theory and study the movements, because they directly talk about all this stuff, which is why I always feel like I'm almost being gaslit sometimes in these conversations. So I did bounce this off some comrades, because study isn't a single thing, which we're doing here today. So I'm gonna read my comrade Ace's thoughts on the article. It says, as far as the article is pretty clear tropes: sassy Black woman, strong Black woman, angry Black woman, promiscuous Black woman, all put Black women in a box and dehumanizes them because they deserve to be able to be all of them, none of them, or however many of them or more they want. I think it relates to Bell Hooks' piece because it shows how the Black experience of colonialism truly sets us apart from other citizens, because whether we are the things they name us or whether we are accepted as American citizens, none of it speaks to the full breadth of what it means to be a Black/African woman, which is identifying as Black feminists. And it's important to untangle ourselves from their politics and narrative. The other thing that he points out, and again, that I think works like Hooks, but there's so many other Black feminist works out there, talk about, is that it is obviously an ideology that is for Black men too. So one of the first things Black feminists talk about is they don't work like white women, with this idea that men are the enemy and all of these things. They're trying to heal their brothers, sisters, sons, grandparents, all of these things, right? So another thing he points out is all those stereotypes could be grafted onto Black men. We would have different examples and call them something different, like sassy Black woman could be, you know, like uppity Black man. When white people try and say what up dog to us, that kind of thing. So the point isn't to equate the two, right? Because again, my whole point about like rape culture, even though it affects young boys, is it's usually a logic of policing women and girlhood and femininity. But the point is, like, the logics are still used to police us. So that's why I think a lot of people get confused and are like, well, are we patriarchs, or how are Black people patriarchal, that kind of thing, because the logic still affect how we have to move through the world. So I think that's the other point. So I was in schools for a while. I talk about this a lot with dress code, but dress code is used obviously to police, punish, and sexually assault Black girls overwhelmingly in these schools. At the same time, it's also used to overwhelmingly target Black queer, non-binary youth and Black boys. Same way, stripping them down, putting them against the wall, asking them to take off their clothes. Now, what I learned from Black feminists was that that is something they're trying to address with sexual assault, for example. So the person who changed my perspective on this was a Black feminist who framed stop and frisk as sexual assault. And ever since then, I'm like, damn, yeah, you're right. Every time I get patted down, thrown up on a wall, gripped, and the TSA, my dick is always going off for whatever reason. Every single time I'm randomly selected, right? All of these things are part of that. then you tie that to empire and all those things. So that was my history with it. Cherie, to your point again about identity reductionism, that is a critique of identity politics. So the first thing those white leftists would have to do is be familiar with the Combahee River Collective statement and have actually read it and studied it and talked about it. And most of them haven't. So what you described with that example of being a light-skinned woman, aware of your identity, aware of how you show up in the world and how that makes you relate to a collective of Black women, is identity politics. If you read the Combahee River Collective statement, that's how they say to practice it. So again, I'm always thrown off by this idea. It was a revolutionary concept taken, white people bastardized it, and now you got the white left like somehow reflecting onto the Black left, and we're saying this stuff. Same way with Garvey and woke. Woke is our terminology. Somehow the right takes it, and now you got white leftists talking about being woke and shit in a negative way. So hope that made sense. You're muted.
You're on mute.
My bad. I didn't know. Did Geechee, do you have a question or comment?
So yeah, I was reading through it. I read all of it, and I was trying to, follow along. And obviously, like, so at one point, I wanted to like get like a clear definition of misogynoir, and I even pull up the sister book who coined it. Yeah, and it was just hard to like really get a good definition. So when I started reading it, I wasn't clear. So I just want to read the first few pages because I had like a range of emotions and then just trying to get the context. So this sister,
I think they define it in the paragraph where they talk about Moya and where they say noir.
Yeah.
Portmanteau. Yeah.
No. She used the same definition from it, but then I was trying to connect it. Like, so again, I don't have a high understanding of it, and so I'm still trying to take that example that she used, and in this situation, because the first, so I just want to read this really quick, the passage, and then like kind of share some of my response. Let's do it. So again, this sister is, I think she's in the UK, and she writes a lot of like relationship stuff. She wrote articles on Vice about like what white people could do to end some of the suffering for Black folks and stuff like that. So she kind of writes on race often. She said, a few weeks ago, a white woman came up to me as I walked through my city's queer district. She leered at me, barked, "You're hot," in my face, and reached out and roughly grabbed my breast. So like that was obviously disturbing to me, and I'm like, and so, but reading the thing now, this wasn't the first time a stranger had touched my chest in public without my consent. And so while I was hurt and disgusted, I wasn't exactly massively surprised. I shook the encounter off, feeling a little shaky and violated, and continued down the street. All of 2 damn minutes passed before a white man came up, looked me up and down, snapped his fingers in a Z formation, and said, "Damn, girlfriend, work it. You're fierce." On this particular day, I was makeup free, clad in my Omnipresence Black Doc Martin boots, and dressed in baggy overalls that make me look like a plumber who just got off shift. There wasn't nothing fierce about it. My 2 non-Black female friends who stood next to me, however, did look fierce, dressed and made up in nines, to the nines, and resplendent in high heels. Yet they went on unnoticed. So in the 2 situations, like I'm seeing, like one is like clearly sexual assault. Like I feel like her and her friends probably should have responded. I know she didn't really like probably lay out everything that happened, but I was like, and then the next one was what I'm reading is like the white man who's not. I don't know that the white man debate, the way she explained the white man, I think I'm left with thoughts of like, who is this white man? And then if he snapped his finger doing the Z motion and saying you're fierce, like I'm just trying to figure out. And then I know the way she explained it is like he was all in her face. And so I was trying to understand, like, obviously one is sexual assault. The other one, I'm trying to figure out how both of those are misogynoir and like what the definition is, so I can like be clearer on how because in the like right after that she started saying how these represent it, and yeah, so that's what I'm trying to figure out as I start with the article.
Yeah, I have an explanation, but Cherie, do you have thoughts that you wanted to respond to with that?
I think with the first one, like I said, it's the sexual assault part too, but I think it's I'm sorry, I'm over here trying to scroll down. I was trying to see what was, because there was something else that happened before the assault happened with the first one.
They're walking through a queer district.
Yeah, they're walking through a queer district.
Okay, got you. Okay, yeah. So I think with the first one, yeah, okay, that one's sexual assault, so it's kind of like obviously like, okay, she's dehumanizing her by like sexually assaulting her. Then the second one with the damn girl, you look fierce, was taken also as misogynoir because it was like, you know, this, like, it's one of those things where like the other people next to her were the ones that were more dressed up, but there was a specific focus on making sure I told this Black woman she looked fierce and did a Z snap or whatever. So I think for me, like I said, it's like that person, we don't know their intentions, but I think she's speaking to the fact that in that moment, it was more about how she's showing up as a Black woman and how this person feels a specific need to perform a type of Blackness or a type of Black womanness that they think is fun, or, you know, or they may even admire. But even with that, it's like a dehumanization of the layers of what she could be. And similar, I mean, I've had a lot of Black women kind of speak to me about, you know, how they feel at whether it be work in other spaces where like somebody may come up and it's like, hey girl, or like, and all this other stuff. And it's like, sometimes it can be kind of like an amplified language of like, you don't come up to Josh and say, hey Josh, or like, but when you come up to me, you feel the need to say, hey Cherie, or whatever, and make it like we're girlfriends or something, but we're not. And then if I don't respond with that energy back, it's like, what's wrong with you? Like, you know, so it just, I think it dehumanizes, it's kind of like minstrelly. Like, I think, yeah, like it kind of applies to like the caricatureness of Black women. And then, like I said, it's an expectation of at that moment, there's nothing else that they want from you more than you to kind of give that thing back. And it's like, if you don't give that thing back, then it's like you can also then be perceived as like, you know, bitchy or whatever, you know, mad Black or angry Black. And it just puts you in a place where, like I said, you're not able to just show up human and exist, you know, and maybe be having a bad day, maybe, you know, whatever. Like I said, is it a level of, like I said, are both different levels of harm? Yeah, maybe, perhaps, but they all still tie in to a certain, you know, ideology that is dehumanizing of Black women. So one you can actually charge somebody for, you know, and maybe take to court. The other, no, I can't charge somebody for coming to my face and saying, hey, girlfriend. And, you know, so yeah, it's maybe a different level of harm, but it both kind of ties from like the same thing. That's, you know, my best kind of analysis of that.
I like that. Well done.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's the words themselves. So misogyny and noir, you know, it's the dialectic between race and gender, between what you call white pathology or white supremacy and patriarchy, right? So some of this is going to look like misogyny, which is the idea that women are inherently sexual and property and things you can grope and use as you like the sexual assault. But as Cherie points out, all of this is different because she is a Black woman. So again, I think Asa had a great point about how that would look for a Black man, for example. So I'm about, it could look like this for a Native man around white settlers, right? But we just out doing our own shit, and they come over to you and they start doing for, you know, Pacific Island, a haka dance or some shit. Or, what's good, my nigga? That type shit, right? They come up to you and try and perform. So there is a racial aspect to it. the way they try to perform for a black woman is like they stereotype black women. But the other thing is also wanting to be like us. And that's something that I noticed from her saying it's the queer district. So this is a thing when we talk about identity politics. What are the struggles that cis black men talk about? Let's look at those. What are the struggles that cis black women talk about? Let's look at those. What are the struggles I hear from my black queer family? Let's look at those. And one of the first things you know, if you know anything about that community, is how fucking annoyed they are that every single white gay man's idea of freedom is embodying some black woman. They're all obsessed with Beyonce. They all started adopting our slang, all of these things. So to me, it's not much different than all the white boys I used to play ball with who wanted to be niggas. But misogynoir gives people language to describe that phenomenon. And so that's how I see this first piece.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense in terms of so for me just reading it, like I couldn't so one, the pretext is this a queer district. And again, I hope I'm not leading, but I was just assuming that the white man was gay. Like yes. I wasn't sure that the person was hitting on them. And then the other part is like I also can assume, and not based off of, before I even looked into the sister and like learn more about other things she's written, I can assume like she like hangs around or has a lot of like white friends because she says she's hanging out with two white friends who's dressed up. Now I know she said she was dressed down, but like, you know, so I guess I was kind of confused if this person is complimenting them, but obviously like the compliment could, if like I'm trying to figure out what way would this person be complimenting them.
Right. Well, you know, Beyonce calls herself, like, to the point, Beyonce calls herself Sasha Fierce. So, like, again, like this idea that you're talking to a black woman, you have to perform in this way. But again, this is unsolicited. This is how I'm seeing it. Like, this is a night out. You're just walking with your friends, and someone unsolicited is trying to perform for you or get validation from you to feel good about themselves during the night. Like, that is how I'm seeing it as an issue in this case. But I did lay that out to say, I mean, there's some tinge to this, right? This person writes for BuzzFeed, all of those things. So we can stereotype about white friends. I'd be very interested in another scenario like this, which is just black queer people, because that exists too. Like in ballroom culture, shitting on other black people for being black, right? Like that kind of thing, because of self-hatred and internalized misogynoir, right? Exists. So this story does talk about being around white people and having to deal with that, but I also think you could have given a similar scenario just talking about black people within a queer space.
Yeah, I think what can kind of makes this really complex is I think there's always been a lot of dynamics between, and I'll just even say even between cis black women and either cis black women and gay black men. There's always been like a constant dialogue of like, obviously there's a solidarity there that there's always talking about, but then there's always this thing of like, oh, which one is copying off of the other, and you know, all these, and that's like an internal conflict. But sometimes I don't know, I think I struggle with sometimes that internal conflict that's specifically between cis black women and gay black men that can sometimes happen, where sometimes a lot of the ending conclusions can, like sometimes on like maybe the gay men's end in some sort of misogynoir, and then even on the straight black woman's side there may be a little bit of homophobia where it's like, okay, now, you know, and that can be very complex when talking about both of the things when it comes to both sides. But I think sometimes when it comes to this specific thing, it's brought up when I'm trying to when I'm trying to talk to, I guess, maybe a cis hetero man about like how cis hetero men can, like, I'll talk to cis hetero men about Martin and how that show had a lot of like misogynoir in it, you know, and the character Shanae was specifically, you know, very anti-black women. And I can point that out to like a cis hetero man, but then they'll jump to like, well, what about the gay men that do act like this? Are they insulting you guys too? And it just becomes this other thing where it's, you know, you're not able to break down like the specific history of cis hetero men mocking black women and the impacts of that on society. you're not able to really fully address that, because it's like, well, if you are going to do that, then not that they're saying this, but I've even had some in the past kind of like, well, why aren't you mad at gay men? Don't they are trans, or what, be just as mad as trans women then, if you're going to be mad? And so the thing is missed. And I think that's why sometimes, I don't know, when we, like I said, when we get rid of stuff like feminism and we get rid of like a framework, then it, like I said, it kind of can tether into other things where you're trying to then kind of explain, okay, well, you kind of even bringing this up can kind of somewhat be tied to maybe a little homophobia on your end, but that's, you get what I'm saying? But I feel like I don't have the language to kind of break that down. I don't know. You get what or read what I'm trying to say, Josh.
No, I absolutely do.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's both my names. Like, I don't mind. I wanted to mention some of the amazing work to honor ancestor Assata that Tanda Sizwe's done, both just throughout the years in radio and organizing, but also just with this written work. So one book I wanted to talk about is Some of Us Are Brave, just talking about different Black women's experiences that Tandy was able to compile over the years and the kind of conversations she's had. And she's also been on root work on BLM, but also recently on Millennials or Killing Capitalism. They went through the audio she has of Assata Shakur. And again, the issues, the language that Assata is using to describe what was going on, it's very clearly about a women's struggle, right? It's very clearly a struggle against patriarchy. So, okay, a lot of people say anti-patriarchy, and that's cool. It's essentially that, but the ideology itself can be feminism. And to some extent, I do think anti-patriarchy has a weakness to it, to your point about where is our framework coming from? Because anti-patriarchy, we see weaknesses in things like anti-capitalism as well, right? That is a ideology, not really, right? It's just an opposition to things. So what is the thing that organizes our thoughts, but more importantly, organizes our action in the world? And so that's why I like Some of Us Are Brave. It talks about different Black women from different political ideologies and backgrounds, and like kind of how they're approaching the struggle. So, I mean, Ava DuVernay is on here, Kathleen Cleaver is on here, Ruby Dee, Carol Boyce Davies, Barbara Ransby. So it's just a complex array of ideologies, right? But trying to address Black struggle or Black women's struggle. So you could claim some of them are feminists and some of them aren't feminists, but again, I'm trying to see how do they look in movement. So that's how I look at that.
Yeah, but I guess specifically, I don't know. I guess you, as somebody, like I said, I don't want to assume, but like presents cis hetero, but I don't want to assume. I'm just trying to figure out, do you have like language for that? Because I think I struggle with how to explain to Black men that, like, oh, if I'm specifically talking about an issue like Martin or whatever, and how his portrayal of Black women in that show was misogynoir, was rooted in misogynoir and is harmful to Black women. And they hit me with, well, what about the queer men, and how are they mocking you too? Or what about trans women? Like, shouldn't that be considered offensive too? Or like I guess I struggle with the language to, like, how do I kind of say that that's a particular struggle where, yeah, there's stuff within that, but you going to that or trying to ask about that, it kind of takes away from the addressing of a specific history of cis hetero men and misogynoir. But I don't know. I'm just trying to.
No, I agree. I think part of that is Black Men Build's work would be, how do we get people to engage, honestly, because that's something that comes from intellectual work. Obviously, you can have a PE session, let's talk about misogynoir and all that kind of shit. But a lot of that is like the community-based work. Again, the stuff that Bell Hooks and these feminists are talking about, where we have to go into the community and talk to each other. So in a men's circle would be an example of how we could address those kind of things that Black Men Build does. We have these values. One of those values is we are transforming to meet the moment. So what are you transforming to do? You want to be a better father? Okay, cool. These are your views currently. This is my experience. This is how I feel about these things. A young person there might share what they're saying. An older person might share what they're saying. And then we can come together when we can explain those ideas. And then maybe after that, that person who is still interested, if they're showing good faith engagement with what you're talking about, you can then point them on to this article about misogynoir when they're more receptive to it. But if you have somebody who's not even open to being receptive to it, if they're going to automatically deny that it applies to their lived experience or they ain't got nothing to do with me, then you're already starting from a place where, first off, we're not aligned in our values. But also, I don't think this is going to be a productive thing. We're not looking for unity. We're going to break apart. So again, more practically, just talk about examples. I think you gave an example of Martin. I do this all the time with brothers. Okay, let's talk about it. Like, why don't you think it's that? And again, sometimes it's the messenger. So Cherie, as a cis woman, or I presume cis woman, you saying that to some Black men might automatically make them defensive. Whereas I can challenge from a place of maybe I was where you were before, maybe I understand kind of how you're thinking, and we can build that way. But I have for many years banged on Martin. Like, this is, again, the Black men in my life know this because it's been a persistent theme in my life when I'm pointing out, hey, isn't this color shit not okay? Or, like, isn't it not okay to keep dogging her out? Don't y'all see how when y'all say you like light-skinned girls at school, or you like Latina girls, or you don't want your child to be too dark, how that's related to your favorite show being Martin and your uncle's favorite show being Martin, right? So I think a lot of it is making it plain that way too. Like, we don't have to bullshit.
Yeah. So what do you, I guess I'm just curious. Oh, I didn't know Geechee had something that he wanted to ask. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess, we were talking about the identity politics of certain things. I think, do you think that that is a good thing to have or to be aware of if you're a Black man or just a cis hetero man in this space, about some of the identity politics of things we do when it comes to how we address Black women, the way we're describing them, whether we're using words as aggressive or if we're like reenacting something, if we're like, rolling our head or doing a particular voice or whatever, even if it's funny or in good faith. Do you think as men that are, kind of principled and kind of like like kind of the foundations of like a Black men build, do you think that they should somewhat consider or take an awareness of certain things like that when speaking on or about Black women?
Oh, I feel like I'm being tossed a layup here. Yes, like, that's the baseline, I know it's sad. This is the state of affairs we're in, but yeah, no question. That's part of what transforming means. We are bonded with Black women and all Black people. We have 9 bars, which is, we're trying to achieve affordable housing for all people. We're trying to end U.S. wars, covert and overt, right? So to do that, you have to understand how you need to show up for your community. And at the bare minimum, that means loving all Black people, understanding how we're oppressed as a whole, and then how we're oppressed differently on a day-to-day basis. So yes, definitely. Obviously, though, that is something that's easier said than done, right? So it is a daily struggle. It's one that takes study, all the things we talk about in Black August, another tradition we try and practice. So I would say the other point is making men aware of the legacy they inherit. So who are we drawing from? And then how are you trying to advance that legacy? How are you trying to improve that legacy? So again, that's why I keep talking about like my introduction to Black feminism or Black feminist ideology and critique. So we're studying Malcolm, 100 Years of Malcolm X. And again, Malcolm wants us to critique and improve. Critique is a gift. So what were his understandings of gender in his time? Were they where we need to be today? No. Right. Who were the people who studied him and wrote critiques about him? So you have James Cone, who wrote a critique about his sexism. And there's some stuff in there that you just can't avoid. Like, women were complaining to Elijah that some of his speeches were too sexist in the nation, So there's some parts of the critique that we have to accept, and then we want to advance it. So then we look at how Malcolm traveled. We look at the Black women around Malcolm, Queen Mother Moore, all those things. So that's the other way I think we get brothers to move, is recognizing like this has always been the tradition. You're hidden from this tradition because Mumia is locked behind a wall and you didn't hear about him until you were grown, because they don't talk about that kind of stuff, right? So that's the other way I see you move people, is make them recognize they're part of a struggle, and they got to go back and get that tradition from others.
Ashe. Anything else from you, Geechee?
I know we got some star comments. I know Geechee has been looking at the comments. So let's if there's anything in here we want to get into, I'm down for the next few minutes.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I think it. I don't know how. Well, I know we just kind of like plan to talk, and then it's just kind of like I'm trying to follow, and I know it's just been more of like back and forth questions about particular things. But so this helpful harm was saying mocking. Is that versus or
No,
mocking?
BS, I think.
Mocking
No,
BS.
versus. You're right. It's probably versus the BS.
Yeah,
mocking-
before there, they said there's a difference of intent.
Yeah, you're right.
Mocking versus emulating.
I think so. That's an interesting one. I think regardless of the intent, it's a problem. Like even if you're emulating us, like, bro, I'm just out. Like she says, like I'm wearing fucking overalls and I'm trying to chill with my homies.
Oh, they were talking about
I think that's the point. But I think that's actually the point. Like the point is there could be a lot of conflation, and I don't think there's like detailedly like what we're talking about. So if they're talking about so Cherie said a few things, and we obviously was talking about other things, but emulating versus mocking, is Martin emulating or mocking black women when he plays Shanae?
Oh, I thought we were talking about the white gay man in the
but I'm saying because with that situation, like the way she wrote that article,
yes,
like I know because again, I think some of these conversations there is like we coming at it different, we coming at it reading different, understanding different, and personalities and all that other stuff. And sometimes it's really hard for somebody to read something the way they read it and understand the way they understand it and try. So, okay, let me think of the context. What's happening? Who's who? And what is this? And if because we talked about definitions, but if the definitions and the understanding is not clear, it's going to be hard for somebody to be like, oh, this is what's happening. So if they say that Martin was obviously mocking not only Shanae, now, again, like I think, as you said, the People Brothers, like they will all argue that Martin was playing all these different characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would be like, well, what about the young boy, or what about the officer, or what about Jerome and all this other stuff?
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess if this person is essentially doing something, mocking or whatever, and I think the other part is like it's I don't know. I just think the conversation should be. There seems like there's some things that we should be able to like have the conversation around like what is happening and how do we all know this thing is happening. So whether it's a play, whether it's a movie or a sitcom or whatever or storytelling or whatever it is, I'm just trying to figure out what should be happening, what shouldn't be happening, and then how do we explain that to people?
Got it. So we're gonna stick on the Martin playing dark-skinned ghetto black women like Shanae. But also my critique was how Pam is treated in the show, called ugly as the darker-skinned best friend to the light-skinned love interest, which is a trope that still exists to this day in Hollywood. So okay. So yeah, I think it is mocking versus emulating. In that case, I don't know. Cherie, were you about to say something about?
I was going to say they were specifically talking about that part when I was bringing up that there's a difference between the degrading of black women or the misogynoir of Martin playing Shanae, or the way he talked about Pam. And like a cis hetero black man will be like, well, what about when gay men and how they act? And, a ballroom culture, or, what about that? Is that not mocking or insulting? Or even talking about trans women, is that not insulting black women too?
That's
like,
right.
And some bring it up as a valid trying to understand. Some bring it up and it seems like a dismissal or a defense, but I'm just trying to figure out how to better navigate that.
No, and then people will say it's identity reductionism. Let's not talk about it. So like, that's the kind of immediate thoughts that I see is like, are trans women not doing the same thing? And it's like, again, to your point, I don't even think emulation is the word, right? So mocking, even if somebody was trying to be progressive, let's say we had a circle and someone says what you said, that trans women are mocking black women too. And then someone else says, no, they're emulating them. Well, that's not accurate either, right? So we would have to struggle with, okay, this brother has some transphobic views, and so does this brother, actually, even though he thinks that he's more progressive in the space than this person. So how do we arrive at a sort of understanding? I think the Martin example is pretty easy because, again, you can just talk about intent, like of the world you live in, of what he's doing, of all of the context around it. But in conversations with people, I mean, so just using that example of that, I would probably, because it takes more time to talk about trans issues, trans identity, things of that nature, hold on to that question in the space. Not because I don't want to address it, but because I know that's something that I might want to talk to the brother one-on-one about, because he's going to have a lot of other questions. We got a lot to go through in the circle, that kind of thing. So I might pull that person to the side. I would then go back to this idea, though, of like dressing up as Black women and why Black men do it, because that would be, I think, something everybody could still contribute to in a way that doesn't require so much knowledge of trans experience and things that nature. If you're trying to explain, if you're just trying to make the space respectful, though, and set some values, that's another thing. Because if somebody's just saying wildly transphobic shit in the space, sometimes you have to check that and make sure that's not something that's allowed. So I think it's situational, honestly.
But would you, I guess, kind of like think that, or kind of like if you're trying to address like mocking of Black women to somebody, right, and then they bring up like gay men or trans women and how they act, do you think that there's some struggles around transphobia or homophobia that then need to be had if they're
absolutely
that? Okay.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that I might try and get this person to the side. I might make a comment, obviously, just resetting the space or talking about our values. And then we would go from there. But yes, that has to be struggled over. And again, it's different if it's a community member, somebody who's just coming into the space for programming, versus if this is somebody who's your comrade, right? Because that's my biggest point. These ideas aren't just things that only exist in community members, right? Yeah. In fact, the circles are spaces you reveal. Your comrade was over there nodding in the corner, and now you're like, wait, shit, we have to have a struggle session. So that's how I would see it. I would obviously prioritize our space, our line, asking people who I'm comrades with, what do you think about this, and move from there.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know we even have enough time to get in it. And I feel like of all the things that were said, there's like an overview. So we talk about like politic and then policy, right? And then what leads to a particular thing. So it seems like we would have another conversation, or we should have another conversation or more conversations. And I know Leah suggested that maybe Layla would be a good person, but so really quickly before we go back, what you were saying was you say Martin is doing this thing, and people's response was, well, what about when gay people do it? And you say, okay, well, that means that person has to deal with that person is struggling with homophobia.
Yeah.
In the space now, what do you do? How do you, like, because again, that person could generally be asking the question that they don't know or they feel whatever, but in that space, now what you do?
Yeah, sure. Let's do a role play. So somebody said that. I said, well, that's not the same thing, because the gay and trans experience is not the same as the Black male experience. So brother, in this space, we like to, or the cis Black male experience. And if you don't know what those words are, we can talk about it later. But brother, in this space, we try and talk from I statement. So maybe you could talk about how you're feeling or your experience, rather than trying to jump into others, right? So we're talking about us right now, straight Black man. I think you identify the same, brother, probably not. Be like, okay, cool. So just as a straight Black man, why would you be doing this? And we can keep the conversation on us. That would be my general approach. But if I know the brother, if I know that he's interested in this thing, or if he's brought it up multiple times, then I might point him more toward, hey, remember we had this conversation last week here, or remember I showed you there's this video in the chat, you can go check that out. So that generally be how I approach it. Of course, different brothers have different approaches, but generally, I think that's what you get in a circle.
And one of the ones that me and Cherie talked about, and I think she mentioned a little bit. So if you, Lorik, are having a conversation with Cherie about something, a conversation you had with a brother or a sister, and in that conversation you say, well, they said, and when you say it, you use like a higher pitch for the woman and you use a lower pitch for the man.
Mm-hmm.
You say that is misogynoir. It leads to misogynoir, and then what should be done in that space?
That's an interesting one. It's really good. Yes, I would, but again, the point is to actually like arrive at unity, change consciousness, and all those things. I think it's pretty obvious that it is in some ways, but if it's obvious to me and not obvious to that person, obviously, I want them to come to the realization why they probably shouldn't be raising their voices and trying to sound like a woman. Because again, it's the same as mocking a man. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can just say the thing. So I would maybe more directly just be like, can we just in the future say the words? But I would have to ask questions, Geechee. You know, like everyone's idiosyncratic. Sometimes there's beef. I would want them to question why they felt that it was okay to do that and then hear their response. If it's a certain defensiveness, right, then we know we have more work to do and we can keep coming back to that. But if they just are someone we have a relationship with, if they're aligned with our values, usually I can move that person, right? Because I'm just like, hey, you know, brother, we don't need to be doing that. And I run into people who are cool. I think there's another issue though, because Black Men Build specifically is trying to organize Black men and create spaces where we can grow as we go and show up as we are. So I think that's different than if you're already in a space with other Black women and stuff. I think that's like BMB in some ways exists to be that space for brothers to come, struggle, and grow. And people, because again, it's a community organization. But I think it can be different if you're already in a space with women comrades and things like that, where there's a certain level of understanding and principledness that's expected for you to be doing that. So I think it does depend on the organizing setting, to be fair.
And then in terms of so again, I think entertainment, plays, cultural work, when Martin is doing, playing different characters, because of the history, it presents misogynoir. But does that say that, would it be saying that anybody who plays the character and use different voices, would that be the same thing? Or it would just be applied to men or Black men, white or Black men who use a voice as they illustrate who, like they're talking to another character. So for instance, if you're doing a play and you're acting like so-and-so, you use a voice that's mimics a man voice or a woman voice, you'll be doing the same thing as Martin doing, is what you're saying?
No, I mean, we got to be dialectical, right? You know, like in different contexts, different settings. I would always like encourage, again, just because of my ideology, you to consider that possibility. Like, that's my whole thing. Just consider it, right? Think about it from my perspective for a little bit. Think about it from the feminist perspective. And if you don't align, cool, but like, just consider it. We have a lot of people who just de facto think it's an insult to ask them to consider something could be sexist, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like some white people consider it's an insult to ask them to consider something might be racist. So I think that'd be my first point. What is the setting? What is the context? What is this person doing? What is this person's identity? All those things play a role for me. Obviously, no, those things aren't entirely the same. That is why I add the context. We add evidence. We make a case. My case against Martin has to deal with years of watching the show, of dialectically going through, having brothers who were fans and cousins who were fans and all those things. Like, I am actually somebody who's internally been a part of the Martin, community and critiqued it. And so I feel that would be the same if you were trying to critique somebody who did a play and did different voices and all of those things. And again, I would still ask, where is the person's critique coming from, right? So we have people who might critique, like we say, Black queer person doing those voices and all those things and say, what aboutism? And then compare it to Tyler Perry, right? Mm-hmm. So all we would have to do is just sit there and say, okay, let's compare this person to Tyler Perry. What is Tyler Perry doing? Tyler Perry's a billionaire. All those things that we on the left know how to do, which is critiquing these Black bourgeois figures and pointing out how they are not like us, how they are not like everyday members of the community who mm-hmm. care about our people and are trying to organically express themselves in art.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I know you had to run, and know we should wrap. Sharif, you have any other things, or like I said, we should probably continue the conversation and even engage work. I know you suggested a few, so we can put those in the show notes links.
Yeah, I'm honored y'all had me on. So
Yeah, this was great. No, I don't think I really have anything else to say. But yeah, I think that was good. Thank you so much, Lyric, for like being able to kind of like, I mean, I think you're like kind of helping me sharpen my analysis and maybe some of the things I can consider more when trying to speak or to point out these things. And yeah, thank you.
yeah, I would love in the future to talk again about maybe some of the critiques that we hear about how Black men are treated in feminist theory over time, and get into those. I know there are some people who point out, We Real Cool is usually, for example, brought up as a critique of bell hooks. Again, yeah, I would love to get into that. Again, not holding any peer person as an icon and saying that they can't be critiqued. And also pointing out how people's analysis changes over time. And we're usually good at recognizing that with other people in the positive direction for Du Bois. In the negative direction when Angela Davis is talking about Obama's the Black radical tradition, right? That doesn't make women, race, and class any less accurate as an analysis. So I just do want to point out, yes, we can talk about how some of these Black feminists were in bed with the feds, but we could do that with any movement. So yeah, in the future, let's get into it.
All right. We kind of went a little extended, but thank you, Lorik, for coming through, and we'll see you soon, bro.
Appreciate y'all. Peace.
All right. Any wrap up thoughts? Longer conversation, but I think it was good, and there were some points made. But any thoughts from what we talked about in terms of the show to work? I mean, maybe even that's like I don't know. I can't think, but I can't think or push this, but maybe that is like along with the work, along with being explicit about the culture work and the stuff with the political work, but maybe that's I guess pushing you to develop PE or develop analysis or write more or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I'm just curious what you think.
I mean, yeah, like I said, you already know I'm trying to I've been challenged a little to try to see if I can cook up more, write down more. And like I said, I struggle sometimes with language for things that, I think, that I understand more, I guess, at my level as through my experience or whatever. So I think, hearing, him kind of, say some similar things to me, but use different words and, different examples or, different approach. Like I said, it definitely helped me open up my spectrum of my approach. Yeah, I think as a cultural worker, that's why honestly, even in my show, my one woman show, I address, a lot of class analysis and race, but even as a Black woman, like I say sexism a couple of times, but it's hard for me to even address in my work just because I know even saying something like feminist or whatever is going to, with certain negative connotations on things could be misinterpreted. So it's like, I still, really scary away from how do I even address gender dynamics and stuff, even in my work as a cultural worker, which, obviously I want to be able to address class, race, and gender. But sometimes I struggle with insecurity on, feeling like I have a really well analysis through my experience, but not necessarily having the political words or framework or even study or whatever to be talking about it. So I think, this is the opportunity now for me to, kind of really develop that, as a cultural worker. So, yeah.
I mean, you could keep things grassroots and still have clear thoughts. You don't have to have all of the political, as they say, jargon. But I think refining your analysis still probably might not sound like a tenured professor or somebody, but I just think,
of course,
you never know. Yeah. But yeah, no, I appreciate the conversation. I think I want to obviously rewatch so I can kind of have a clarity. I think because for me that article I was like trying to follow, and I'm like, wait, I thought it meant this, and then but yeah, there was a couple things in there that it was kind of hard to follow for me. And then in terms of the definitions, like I just do way better with like clear definitions and trying. So I even started reading the Misogynoir Transform, Black Women's Digital Resistance. And
nice.
I know a lot of it is like online conversations and things. So it's like, yeah. So it still was hard to kind of, for me to get a concrete definition of it. So it can be like, okay, this is definitely that. And so I guess with you or even Lorca, whoever else is more versed in the words and the meaning, they can be like, oh, that's clearly that. And when you say that's clearly that, that's only clearly that for people who understand it. Because if I'm like still struggling on making sense of it, you know how like somebody say a word, you're like, what that word mean? I don't know what it mean. Like somebody who have to explain it to you. I feel like I didn't get that like good like explanation where I can understand what it is so I can physically see it. But and then when Laura was saying something about like the context and the person, you got to consider all the background and the things, and you know, comparing him to, or I'm comparing a queer man or a queer person doing something to what's that what's the dude name? Tyler Perry. Like he said, you'd have to consider the context, and I'm like, okay, well, they both doing the same behavior, and only one of them is this. Like again, trying to wrap your mind around that clarity sometimes can be difficult for somebody who's not familiar with the concept. But
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. My bad. Sorry, my bad. I was just agreeing. Yeah, I think and then I was also gonna say I think it's kind of similar to like some of the class stuff, you know, of like, you know, sometimes when, you know, somebody that may be yeah, I think it happens a lot of times, like when we say, like when a person that actually has money will be like, oh, but I have money and all this money, but my dad doesn't love me, or but I, you know, or that, but my parents I don't ever see them, or you know, and then they you know, it can be seen as like a, you know, kind of a deterior and a lack of class analysis sometimes, because it's just like, okay, that's a personal thing, but the dialectic or whatever is that you grew up in a particular class and this person grew up in a lower class or whatever, and they're talking about a particular struggle that they're having as a poor person in a capitalist economy, and you're throwing in, but I've experienced pain too, or I have this too, you know. So I think it's kind of similar. That's not exact same thing, but it's just like, you know, yeah, I think it's like, oh, it's like for a rich person to be like, oh, well, you assuming that everything is so perfect just because I have a lot of money is just the same thing as me assuming that, you know, your life is so bad because you don't have money. Or, you get what I'm saying? Like when it's like, yeah, it's like, it's just, you have to be able to actually apply the class analysis to it to make sense, where it's like, yeah, I see on the surface level how it could seem like the same thing. But, you know, when you think about the actual class of the people and what one stands to lose, and, you know, it's so many other things that make them different. That's, you know, I guess me trying to show kind of like, you know, I guess kind of how we have to always be considering the overall political or identity in society and stuff too, when talking about particular things. Yeah.
Thank you. Ongoing conversation. Y'all, thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure you keep the conversation going in the chat. We got a book event coming up on the 30th if you're in Atlanta at Morehouse, which will be a conversation around Beneath the Mountain, anti-prison reader, edited by Mumia Black and Mumia Black, that's crazy word. Mumia and Jennifer Black. So yeah, thank y'all for coming on. Hopefully we'll see good brother Yusuf back next week. And yeah, man, I hope y'all enjoy your night.
Peace.